following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back for hour number 2 here tonight in the X Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. If you'd like to send me an email, xzone@xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And we're coming to you tonight on the Talkstar Radio Network, Mutual Broadcast Network, and channel number 54, the X Zone TV channel that is exclusive to Simul TV. My guest this hour, X Zone Nation, is Dr. Will Horton, and we're going to be talking about substance abuse as well as addiction. And Dr. Horton, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you in beautiful Canada there, eh?
Any better? I just couldn't take it. It's one of those great days. Now,
Cool.
Be honest, is that water or vodka? If it's vodka, I envy you.
No, it's water.
Dr. Horton, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into doing the fascinating work that you do.
Well, my story is like a lot of people, especially when it comes to addictions. I got involved in the addiction world as a client, right? Because an addiction took away a couple things I loved. When I got out of high school, I wanted to join the military, be a pilot. I was on track to do that. And an addiction, alcohol, took that away. And so after I got out of the Army, I spent several years, but after I got out of the Army, I decided I wanted to be an actor. And so I started becoming an actor and was doing pretty well. And again, the drinking took that away. And it took me a while to finally beat the addiction. I went through treatment through the Veterans Administration here in the States. It was a good treatment. It just, nothing seemed to work. And then I was lucky to be exposed to a different way of thinking, and some techniques and some things that flipped my thinking, and then everything made sense. The treatment they gave me at the VA, the 12-step program therapy, it all clicked in, and a lot of it had to do with hypnosis and NLP, and my brain started to change, and it started me on a trajectory. And then I eventually became an alcohol and drug counselor, and then a psychologist, and it's been a big focus of my work ever since.
I understand you've been doing this for over 35 years.
Yep, about 38, 39 now total.
Wow. Now, for our listeners who heard you say hypnosis, everybody knows what that is. But NLP, X Zone Nation, is neuro-linguistic programming. And how does that work, Doctor?
Well, it's basically how your brain works, not why, right? Because a lot of psychology, even though I'm a clinical psychologist, psychology focuses on more theory and maybe why do you do things, where NLP and hypnosis works on how your brain does things. I always usually just give a quick example like how your brain works. If you think about somebody you really like, a buddy, a pal, a friend, just not a lover, but somebody you really like.
Okay.
If you imagine them in your mind, they'll take some kind of spatial arrangement. Maybe they're right in front of you, maybe they're to the left, but there's that person you like.
Right.
Great. Now, if you let your mind go blank, now think about somebody you don't like. They're a pain in the butt. You really don't like them. That's okay. They're just like blah, and let them pop into your mind. They take another spatial arrangement. They're
Yes.
in probably a different spot. Now, it's fun if you try in vain to move that person that you dislike to the spot of the person you like, and see what your brain says.
It's not moving.
Right. It's your brain will say no. It's just, that's a quick thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it has nothing to do with logic or reasons. It's just how your brain sorts information. And once you begin to look at things like that, it begins to make sense on how things work in your mind, because people are not logical. For God's sakes, we've seen that, especially in the last few years, even, it's like on steroids. People are not logical, right? And so, and addiction's a great example of that. If logic worked, there would be no need for Alcoholics Anonymous or drug or alcohol treatment. People would go, oh, I need to quit, and they would quit, but they don't.
You know, I understand that perfectly because years ago, about 20 years ago, I had avascular necrosis of the femoral head. I used to be a diver, and it was called Caisson's disease that caused it. And my doctor, before surgery and after surgery, had me on Percocet. And one day I realized that, hey, these pills are overtaking my life. And I just made the decision. I went into the medicine cabinet, poured them down into the toilet, flushed it, and that was it. That was it. My mind realized that, hey, this is no good. And you know, like people say, well, yeah, Rob, it's only a pill. But it's a powerful pill. The addiction that you can have with Percocet and other opiates, we're seeing that today.
Oh yeah, and it's killing hundreds of thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can't understand why people can't do what I did when they make that realization.
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the idea that because it was easy for one person, especially the person that's easy for, you go, why can't everybody do this?
Yeah.
You know, Michael Jordan still doesn't understand how people aren't better basketball players. Why can't you play like I play? Right?
Because they're not as tall as he is. Hello.
They don't have the same genetic code, and a lot of this now they know it has to do with the genetic code, right? That some of it's genetic, and where you were, how long you've been taking it.
Right.
Maybe you could be thankful to whatever you believe that you had that realization when you still had that ability to just say I'm done and walk away. So and many people don't.
Is it easier for a person who comes from a family where there's no alcoholism or any other dependency within their DNA or genetic code to break a habit than it is for, let's say, somebody who's raised by an alcoholic father and mother?
There's no real research on that, but one of the things you do see is people that were raised in an alcoholic family, which is a great majority of the population, by the way. There's belief sets that begin to get put into your head as you're growing up, right? But especially when you're a little kid and you don't have cognitive choice. So let's say like the only time you saw your mom and dad have fun and get along, they were drinking beer, maybe playing cards, things like that. Maybe we saw our parents do, right? So you began to develop the idea that the only way to have fun is to have some drinks, right? And it becomes a belief that runs deep in your mind. And a lot of our cultures, depending on where you are, and here in the States and parts of Canada, it's just part of the, real men drink. How many times you get into a career, well, we work hard and we play hard, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that whole thing. So there's certain belief sets, right? And a lot of people are actually taught, like, don't trust a man that doesn't drink. Don't trust a man that can't control his liquor. Don't trust women that can't handle their liquor. Well, then all of a sudden, a few years, decades later, a person decides to quit drinking. Somewhere in the back of their mind, there's a little voice going, so you're not a man. You're not trustworthy. Yeah, this should be easy. I'll just, and then of course, depending on which addiction you're talking about, some of them are socially acceptable, right? The alcohol and now, the marijuana everywhere here in the States and Canada. And boy, I was in Vegas and some of the casinos are opening up their own types of vaping, So it's like, okay, that'll be, with THC. I'm like, okay, this is interesting.
Now, why is drinking and drug use up so much these days?
Well, it's kind of interesting. It's been creeping up, and whenever economic or there's socially upheaval times, people have a tendency to drink more. And in the last few years, they'll use more pharmaceuticals, whether they're legal or illegal, as a stress reliever. Because drinking is a good example because it's a way to self-soothe, have a few drinks, calm down. And then when COVID hit and parts of depending where you were, I was blessed. I was in Florida. We were open pretty quick. But, when things shut down, one of the interesting things nobody talks about is when that happened. Rob, let me ask you a question. When was the last time that 99% of your life was outside of your control. Where you can go, what you can do, who you can talk to, you have to rely on me to get your money through one shape or another, right? And for most people, that's when you were an adolescent, right?
No, not really.
Well, I mean, but your parents controlled a big majority of your life or society. No. Oh, okay.
No.
Well, for most people, that is true, right?
You told me to be honest.
Okay. Well, but I mean, if you think about it, it's like, if your parents said no, and you're 16, it was tough. You couldn't, a lot of your things were controlled. So
well, I guess I was lucky enough to be raised by two very responsible parents who taught us from a very early age what was right, what was wrong. And,
so
we had
no controls from your parents. If you said, I'm staying out all night Friday night, I'll see you Monday.
Well, they knew we wouldn't do it.
But if you did it, I mean, so all I'm saying, let's not go down that path. But for a lot of people, the last time all of this stuff was out of your locus of control was when you were young. And now you're 40 years old and you can't go to the gym. You can't go to the movies. You can't go to the theater. You can't go to dinner. You couldn't hang out with your friends. They closed the churches.
Yeah.
All that other stuff. So people kind of in their minds flipped back into adolescence. Why you also saw two things I always thought was interesting. You had two groups. Is a lot of people went along with the rules very easily.
Right.
Right. We'll just do this, And then you had the other group on the other side that were like, no, this is bullshit. I'm not going to do it. Da, 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 da. And there's, I always wonder, is the two people, the people that went along with the rules, never argued, never questioned, was that their response when they were in like high school? Were they
I see where you're going with this.
Where they were the good people, they just did this. Or you were over here with the people going, screw you, I'm going to do it my way. Da, 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 da. So there's that. But when all of your other self-soothing mechanisms were taken away, going to the movies, going to dinner, hanging out with your friends, when they were gone, it was easy to pick up alcohol and or drugs.
All right, stand by. We've got to take our break.
Okay.
Exonation Dr. Will Horton is our guest. And if you'd like to find out more about Dr. Horton, his website is drwillhorton.com. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. The good doctor and I return on the other side of this break. Don't go away. Do you enjoy paranormal, sci-fi romance, yet find yourself tired of the same old themes and storylines? Then you won't want to miss Kahira O'Donnell's latest exciting release, To Taste You Again. Alien Lord Kane McKean knew the moment that his destined mate was born. He watched from afar, waiting for her to grow from child to woman. However, before she was old enough, she was stolen from her home world by flesh pirates. Kane searched 10 long years to find her held in a suspension chamber, a 10-year-old girl in a woman's body. He rescued her and swore to give her time to grow up, but with his very life depending upon winning her as a mate, has he waited too long? Get your copy today. To Taste You Again by Kahira O'Donnell is now available on Amazon or KahiraO'Donnell.com. Explanation, Dr. Will Horton's our guest. And Dr. Horton, are you saying that during the time of COVID, when we were told what to do, when we could do this, that, and the other thing, that people actually used this as an excuse to become alcoholics and drug addicts?
Well, I don't say an excuse, but it became a self-soothing mechanism that got out of control in a lot of ways. Because also,
but if a person like my wife and I and our children, we've got 6 children, we've got 15 grandchildren, and my wife and I didn't change our social habits. Our children didn't, take up drinking or use it as an excuse. There's got to be something more than this, because what I'm hearing is an easy pass. Like fine, COVID was there, the authorities were telling you what to do, and if you started drinking too much or using recreational drugs or whatever, It's understandable. I don't buy that, sir.
But you don't have to. That's just what I believe. I just think it made some of the safety checks were off. You didn't have to drive to work in the morning. For a lot of people, you didn't have to drive home, And again, I would say, a lot of it has to do with you. If you still could talk to your family and hang out, well, that was a self-soothing that a lot of people got taken away.
Well, we did like everybody else did. Picked up the computer, used FaceTime or any of the other social media platforms to communicate. Like, you weren't blocked off. You weren't segregated from your family. The communication was still there. But
it was virtual. It wasn't live. And for some people, they need the live. Humans need human contact. That's all the research will point to that.
Right, but doesn't the research now also point to that using digital communication is also the contact that people need?
No, I've not seen that research, that they need real live contact.
But what's the difference between virtual contact and real contact when you're speaking to a real person?
I can't see you up close. I can't touch you. I can't catch your vibe.
But prior to this, sir, people would use the telephone and talk for hours on the phone.
Yeah, but they could hang up the phone, get in their car, and go to church and hang out with the people in their church.
Oh, they could do the same thing virtually now.
Yeah, but that's not live.
Well, yes, it is.
Well, we're going to disagree on that. I don't think this is live. If so, it's not live. You're not in the room with the person.
But you need to be in the room with the person in order to carry on your life and not become an alcoholic or a druggie.
Well, it's not an excuse for that. I was just saying that the way people could self-soothe. If you lived alone and you had no family, sir, and you had nobody to hang out with as soon as you clicked off work, right? And it would be, it's not an excuse, but if you were prone to drink more, it would be much easier to drink more.
Ah, there's the key word, if you're prone.
Yeah, and there's some genetic predispositions to being prone to doing those things.
Okay, so in your opinion, how did the statistics of alcoholism and drug abuse spike over the COVID situation?
Well, the sales went up. Alcohol sales went up like 35% across the board. Of course, opioids been going through the roof exponentially. And it seems like the pockets of where it was used the most is where people had less choices. Like the opioid epidemic here in the States, they could always track the places that experienced it the worst were the places that had like all the factories shut down, the coal mines shut down, so people for generations grew up with, they had options. They could go to work, they could do this. And when those things got to being shut down, and it was flooded with cheap, easy to access opioids. It wasn't hard to go get them.
Yeah, I can't understand how the alcohol went up 34 to 35% when people could not leave their homes, and how did they actually get the alcohol then?
Well, they could. Here in the States, they waived it where they could deliver it.
Oh, really?
Right. Also, liquor stores were considered an essential service. The liquor stores here in the States never shut down, right? And I pointed out, it's like, I said to somebody, go, well, liquor stores sell water. I go, here where I'm at, there's a big ABC liquor next door to a pharmacy and a gas station. Both of those places sell water, right?
Exactly.
You need water, right? But it was like, it was considered an essential service because, it's, I believe, parts of our government want us, fat, drunk, and stupid.
Is everyone who drinks or takes pharmaceuticals, are they considered to be alcoholics or drug addicts?
No. I would say, I look at it this way. When you're born, you're pretty much, as psychology and medicine say, you're tabula rasa, you're a blank slate. So you're abstinent growing up. Most people, when they're quite young, they just don't drink. right?
Right.
Let's use drinking as the example.
Okay.
You may see your parents drink, you may see this, but you don't drink. And then for most people in the Western world, they will start experimenting with drugs and alcohol, usually in adolescence, right? Usually between 13 to 17 or 18. As much as every parent might say, not my kids, it's just what's going to happen. But for people that experiment with it, a lot of the people will experiment with it and go, I don't like this. I don't like the way it tastes. I don't like the way it makes me feel. They just won't do it ever again. They're just,
right.
I'm done, right? So they go back to being abstinent. Now, for the people that experiment with it, most will move into being social drinkers. You know, they could drink or not drink. They don't worry about it. It's no big deal, right?
Right.
And so that's fine. So they can drink, not drink. But then there's another group where they begin to abuse the substance. And a lot of times it's a reaction to things going on around them. It could be negative, like you might have seen people where, you know, they're going through a nasty divorce, they lose their job, and it's not to excuse it, but they start drinking more.
Right.
Right. Or they lose a loved one, so they're drinking more. Right. Or it could be maybe even on the positive side, somebody goes away to college and they join a fraternity that's a big partying fraternity, like down here, the University of Florida. I know Canada has those party schools that people go to, right? And so they go to school and they're drinking like maniacs. If you looked at it, I mean, they're getting in trouble. Maybe they're on the dean's list. They're getting by, but they're drinking too much. But most of those people, when whatever that stressor is, for good or bad, subsides, they get over the divorce, they get another job, something like that on the negative side. Or even on the positive side, you see guys, okay, they graduate college, they get a job, they get married. They quit partying like maniacs. They quit drinking too much. They go back, and contrary to what an addiction person might used to say, they go back and they're normal. They can have a drink, they cannot have a drink, right? But then there's a small subset that may be genetic, that once they hit that problem where they're you know, abusing a substance, they stay there and they drop down to they're dependent on it. That's like, to use the analogy, like the 40-year-old frat boy.
Gotcha.
You know, he's still couch surfing on Friends, you know, stuff like that. The person but that person, if they get into that group, there's only two options: drink or total abstinence. They don't seem to be able to go back and drink normally, right? And it's just kind of interesting to see. And a lot of this, there was some research done. I call it the happy rat study, because a lot of this, they did it here in the States, and they took some rats and they hooked them on out. They did it on different drugs, but they hook them on stuff. And then, you know, and the rat was in there, usually a male rat. And then, you know, they'd throw in a female rat in heat, and the rat would just keep getting high or drinking or whatever, or food, and the rat would ignore it. So that's when they started this zero tolerance, and the whole idea of that once this happens, you can never go back. But really, what they found was some people looked at the study and go, you know, there's a flaw in the study. Rats are very social creatures. If they took the rat out of they get him hooked on, let's say, booze, right? They get him hooked, and they take him out of the unhappy rat cage and put him in the happy rat cage where there's other rats and there's baby rats and there's stuff to do. All of them just quit. Right, even though they still had whatever the dispersal mechanism was set up, they just wouldn't do it, right? And this kind of coincides with, here in the States, we had this phenomenon called the Vietnam War, where, you know, the U.S. was terrified because we had 500,000 troops in combat, that addiction was through the roof because they were in an unhappy cage. Vietnam was not a popular war. Nobody wanted to be there. 94% of the people were drafted or something like that. So they were just there. And so it was in, you know, Vietnam, obviously. So you had, you know, hashish, and you had opium, and it was just paradise if you wanted to get high. And then the military pumped in a lot of alcohol to keep people calm, to keep the soldiers calm. So they were gearing up for this big onslaught of addicts coming back, alcoholics and addicts coming back to Vietnam. Oh, and by the way, we trained them in weapons and mass destruction because that's what we do as soldiers, right? And so they were gearing up for it. But when most of the soldiers came back, way over 90%, after they adjusted a little bit, they never went back to using the drugs or drinking the way they did there.
How come?
They were in a happy cage. except for a small percentage that couldn't quit. And again, it may be more genetic than, you know, than what they knew at the time. And now there's some research beginning to come out that there's some genetic, if you have certain genetic predispositions, your body can't process alcohol and or certain drugs the same way. And that's for the alcohol side. For the drug side,
right,
pharmaceutical companies are brilliant at designing drugs that make you want to take them. They're getting very good at it.
Just like aspartame in pop.
Oh, yeah. It makes you want more.
You know, it reminds me of what the Hershey company does in Hershey, Pennsylvania, the chocolate people, is when you start working there, they want you to eat as much candy as you want. Go silly. Because what happens? People get sick and tired of eating the candy, that it's no longer a desire for them, and away you go. And I would imagine that food is also addictive.
Oh, food's very addictive, especially what they know now about sugar, you know, and of course, some of the research, how they jury-rigged the research in the 60s and 70s to declare war on fat, and it was funded by the sugar companies, right? So that, heart disease is caused by fat, not the sugar. And now it's pretty well known that that's the opposite is true, right? And we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you know? So.
And a perfect example of that, doctor, is the keto diet, because with keto you eat protein, not the carbohydrates. And what's sugar? A lot of carbohydrates. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Why do you do what you do, doctor? Like let me first of all, let me preface this by saying, I think what you do is admirable. I really do. And the world needs doctors like yourself who actually go out and help these people. So why do you do what you do?
Well, it started to give back, right? Because there's a lot of bad information about addictions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not. And when I first got in the field, I was pretty evangelical about it had to be a certain way, like the 12-step program. This is it. This is that. And now, because I'm also a psychologist and reading all the research, it's like, well, there's no simple answer here. There's tweaks, you know,
mm-hmm.
and not everybody likes the 12-step program, right? Like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. And there's a lot of, even in that world, there's a lot of people that don't understand the 12-step world, right? And when I talk about it, people go, yeah, but I read AA only has pick a percentage. They're making numbers up anyway. Success rate, right? And I go, well, what did you call that group? Alcoholics what? Anonymous. If it's an anonymous group, you cannot keep track of membership. It's physically impossible. You have no idea what a success ratio could or could not be, right? And then on the clinical side of it, it breaks my heart, but a lot of the treatment centers here in the States, I'm not sure about Canada, they kind of jury-rigged their numbers so the success might sound better than what it was, right? Because one was busted for a while saying they had this super high success rate. And then when they got challenged, they said, well, we base our success rate by people that leave the program early. Well, what about people that stay the 28 days? What about 6 months later? Well, we don't know. We're not tracking that, right? And so that part breaks my heart, but it's something that started as a like a mission to help people, and it's kind of morphed into that. Now it's educational, and I train a lot of therapists on how to work with addictions.
You and I have to take a break, doctor. Please stand by. And X Zone Nation, Dr. Will Horton's our special guest, and his website is Dr. and that's Dr. willhorton.com, and we'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
So I was watching the X Zone TV channel last night when I was abducted by aliens, and they kept repeating to me over and over again, simultv.com, simultv.com.
What's simultv.com?
That's what I asked them. They had it written on the side of their UFO.
How do you spell that?
UFO.
No, I mean simultv.com.
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 Right. simultv.com.
Interesting that you were abducted by aliens in a simultv.com UFO last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Now that you mention it, I remember now last night I was awakened from a deep sleep. My great-grandmother was standing there. She said she'd come from the hereafter to tell me about simultv.com. She even spelled it out for me.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
simultv.com.
simultv.com, sonny boy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Guys, you'll never guess what my psychic guru just told me.
simultv.com.
Exactly. Are you guys psychic too?
Of course.
We all know about simultv.com. simultv.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Dr. Will Horton's our special guest. His website is drwillhorton.com. Doctor, how do you use hypnosis and NLP to help these people who suffer from one addiction or another?
Well, what we try to do with the hypnosis and the NLP is bypass the critical factors of the mind and change at the subconscious level, right? So it can speed up what might take a longer if you just tried another method. Mm-hmm. So it kind of, like I said, it begins to change how you think about things, right? And to begin to flip things in your mind. A simple intervention is where if you think about something, Rob, if you think about something that used to be true and now is not, right? Whatever it is, right?
Okay.
So, you know, like, let's just use an example. Let's say at one time you smoked, now you don't, right? So if you think about smoking and now you don't smoke, it's in a certain spot of your mind. It used to be true and now it's not, right? You used to live somewhere else, now you live where you live. Well, that means your brain is coding information in a certain way, right? And one of the problems people get into when they're trying to make a change is the only way to get something like that into that part of your mind, like let's say I no longer drink, it has to move inside your mind. And that usually takes quite a bit of time. But you can speed that up by some simple techniques. Like one is just thinking about this behavior I want to change. And then you think, you know, I used to eat too many carbs, but now I don't, right? I'm not that person anymore. It's that simple. It's a very powerful statement when you make those kind of statements. You know, I don't eat carbs anymore. I'm not the kind of person that eat carbs. That's not who I am anymore. It begins to move it in your brain. And then it just becomes the kind of person like that you just don't do it, as opposed to, you know, having to force it being done. And so you can bypass that and you can speed up things because, you know, the profession that uses hypnosis the most is the sports world. You know, they're always using visualization and all these sports psychology, which usually is hypnosis and NLP to help speed up the learning curve. Right? Because your brain learns a lot faster than people think it does. Right. And so you could do that. And so that's kind of that's one reason I like using the hypnosis and the NLP. Does it work all the time? No, nothing works all the time. But the great thing I love about it is, you know, if it's going to work pretty quickly. You know, it's not like, hey, Rob, come into therapy for the next 27 years, you know, and we'll work on you. I'm not a big fan of a lot of psychotherapy. I never have.
No way.
Yeah.
So Dr. Horton, what speciality or special thing do you bring into the work that you do?
Well, I think a lot of it is the empathy of being on that side of the table. I know what it's like to be on that side of the table, right? And the insight a little bit about what it's going to take to make the change to be out of that bad stuck state. And like you say, some of it, when people are first trying to get over it, you know, there's a lot of blame, there's a lot of shifting, there's a lot of, you know, it's not my fault, right? But there is some truth. You said this earlier, is once you become aware that there's a way out and you choose not to take that way out, now you got to look in the mirror and say, okay, now, you know, if I'm staying high, I'm drinking, I'm doing whatever, you can't blame the circumstance. Like, you know, you didn't know what you didn't know, but now you know what you know. It's time to change.
In your opinion, sir, is marijuana a gateway drug?
Not really. I don't think it's, and the research doesn't seem to point that out. That a lot of that goes back to the 60s here in the States, where they wanted to link it with hippies and the African American community so they could demonize the anti-war crowd.
Okay. In your opinion, was it a good idea to legalize marijuana in certain areas? Because, you know, I think that marijuana plus alcohol is one hell of a dangerous combination.
Yeah, we're seeing that. It looks like in Vegas and, well, all over where you can do it, because now you can hit the vape pen, which has heavy THC, while you're at the club. So then it's a compounding effect. Right. I don't think they've thought it through, but if it follows like what they did in certain other countries, Portugal, Amsterdam, places, well, that's the Netherlands, but Amsterdam, is when they first legalized it, there was a spike, but then it starts to level off, right? And so we'll see if we see that here, right? Yeah.
If a person is addicted to alcohol and they have never used marijuana, if they were to start using marijuana, would this double the risk of being addicted to both of them and cause one hell of a mess for a person like you to walk in and help them?
I would personally say yes, because what happens once you get high, you lose your critical factors. So
Gotcha.
like, you know, I haven't had a drink in 38 years. Gosh, I'm getting old. And yes, I sobered up at 12 or something like that, right? But yeah, if I got high, my critical factors would say, I don't want that beer, would be lower. My willpower, if you will, would be lower. And so, you know, so yeah, I think it could be damaging. It's just like every time I've had to use pharmaceuticals, like I've had several knee surgeries. I blew my knees out in jump school in the Army. And I had, well, we all have, you know, I had face surgery. And when they give you the painkillers, I'm personally terrified. I take them because I'm not stupid. I'm not going to writhe in pain, you know, but I'm very careful. I make sure, you know, obviously my wife, but I tell some of my friends, hey, I got to take this stuff because, you know, I don't want to do something stupid.
Yeah.
Right? And so, but that's, again, like you pointed out, that's the locus of control. You know, I got control over it. I can tell other people, you know, I can give the pain pills to my wife and say, only let me take these the way they're prescribed. Right. And so, yeah, I think together the compounding effect is scary. Right. Because, again, even if you're a normal person, but if you have a few beers, you might do something stupid. People do stuff dumb when they're a little bit, you know, lubed up. So
but do they use the effect of getting lubed up as an excuse?
Well, what it does is it depends how much you've had, but it shuts down the part of your brain that thinks behavior through. You know, it's the one like it's midnight and your buddy says, we should go home. You're like, I'll be fine in the morning. It'll be okay. You know, and then when the alarm goes off at 5:30, you're like, what was I thinking? And you weren't at that moment. You weren't. It shuts off the ability to project into the future.
Doctor, we're getting a lot of interference from your headset. I don't know if you're moving the wire in and out of the connection. So we're going to take a little break here, and if you'd be kind enough just to check your connection, we'd appreciate it. All right, sir. Exonation, our guest this hour is Dr. Will Horton. His website is drwillhorton.com, and we'll be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. be accosted in her bed and abducted by aliens was the last thing Michelle expected. Yet the fateful morning of her destined death changed everything. Lord Lan Ramos, Alpha King of Vidar, the monstrous befanged alien looming over her bed, was her destined mate come to save her from certain death. He is a telepathic mute shifter. Can Michelle accept him and his animal? Once on Lan's home planet, Michelle becomes increasingly psychic, revealing her as the fabled Oracle of Vidar. As factions conspire to destroy them, will they overcome mounting threats? Will Michelle's growing gifts save them, or ultimately destroy her? Don't miss this sci-fi shifter romance with charismatic and engaging characters. Get your copy today. The Oracle of Vidar, available on Amazon or CahiraO'Donnell.com. That's CahiraO'Donnell.com. And welcome back, everybody. Dr. Will Horton's our guest. First of all, Doctor, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's a great pleasure talking to you. And
I think I fixed the mic. Should sound better.
Yes, sir, you did. Thank you for doing that. It's no secret that the mental health in the United States and in Canada is a total disaster. Here in Canada, for example, we have homeless people that are just putting up encampments all over the place. They have drug issues, they have alcohol issues, and basically it seems as if they've given up. Like, what the hell? You know, I go to the government pays them $1,400 and some odd dollars every month. And they don't pay taxes. They don't have to do this. They don't have to do that. And it seems as if this is their way of revolting against society. However, I believe that the underlying issue in all of this is our mental issues. And in my opinion, there is not enough money going into the mental health field, whether it's here in Canada or the United States. What's your comment on that, sir?
Oh, yeah, I agree with that 1,000%, if that would be possible. We pump so much money into the physical health of people. Mm-hmm. We don't worry about the mental health, because still there's that paradigm that just fix the body, the mind. You know, you don't have to worry about the mind. Just fix the body. Just fix the body. So they'll pump all kinds of money into, like you say, any kind of physical thing. But then they don't want to pay. And here in the States, we have the horrible, insurance system. They pay minuscule toward mental health,
right?
But they'll pay unlimited toward physical health. And like here in the States, especially like Medicare, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers are just bailing out of the Medicare system, because you lose money seeing a client by the time it's done. You got office, you got overhead, you're sitting there talking for an hour, and you make $27. And 5 years ago you made $60. So it's like they're cutting it back. And then here in the States, then what they do, and I've seen it some in Canada, they start blaming the practitioners.
Yeah.
Like, we're not working hard enough. Why don't you see more people? Well, first of all, there's only so much time in a day, and I've got to make a living. It's like, it's bad. And yeah, so I think that's the underlying need, because the people in the streets, if they're homeless and they're in that, they've lost hope, right?
Yeah.
And one thing that talking to other people can give you is that hope. If people show you a way out, but if nobody's doing that, right? There's that cool study where they took this is bad, another horrible study. They took some rats, right? And they put them in there and they're drowning. Right. And if they saved that rat before it drowned, right, pulled it out, that rat, when it would be thrown back in the water, would literally swim for, I think it was like 30 hours before it drowned. But generally, if you just took a rat off the street and threw it into the water, it was dead in like 15 minutes, because it didn't learn hope, a way out. Right. And again, our neurology, hasn't changed. So we're, we're always looking, for these pharmaceutical, things. And again, when people are homeless and this mental health crisis, one of the hardest things about that is those are the people that need the most help, even if there's a pharmaceutical help, that a pill that they could take. First of all, you got to get it to them. Secondly, they may need help reminding themselves to take it.
Right.
It's like all this other, but that's gone now, and it's horrible.
So here we have the COVID factor complicating the alcoholism, complicating the drug abuse. And now because of this combined shitload of things that are happening to these people, it's making it worse. And I would imagine that the worse it is for the person who's an alcoholic or who is a drug addict or who is homeless, put all these together, it makes your job nearly impossible.
Right. Yeah. And, here in the States, when they shut down the mental health center, there used to be lots of mental health centers in the States.
Mm-hmm.
And Ronald Reagan, as an infinite wisdom, decided that wasn't good. They shut down all the mental health centers and said, we'll do outpatient, not understanding a lot of the people, especially the people that, and it's still true, a lot of the people that are homeless are chronically mentally ill.
Right.
That means, and I believe in miracles and I believe in magic, so to speak, but they're not going to get a lot better. They need constant help, and they kick them to the curb. And Canada's kind of the same way. They don't have the mental health systems.
That's right. We don't.
To give people that in-house help,
We've heard a lot of horror stories about the VA here in Canada. Is it getting any better for our veterans who have given so much, and it seems they get so little back?
Well, yeah, that's always one of my pet peeves. When people tell me, thank you for my service, I always say, well, then quit voting these idiots that send us to war and then want to cut the VA. It's like, thank you for the service. Now, we love you, but don't ask for anything.
Yeah, we don't want to take care of you.
Yeah, we don't want to take care of you, right? And then the whole idea here, for a while, they were going to privatize the VA. And even if you're a businessman, a guy like me, 60 years old with no knees and a bad back and other issues from the military, I don't think an insurance company would want to cover me.
No, that's true, sir.
But the people that work there are great. I've been in the VA system, since I got out of the service. And the system is bad, but that's the bureaucratic side. The people that work there are generally wonderful human beings, by the way, at least in my opinion.
I feel very bad for doctors like yourself, as well as those in the medical practice side, where they are told by the government, if you want to earn more money, take on more clients and make the visits shorter. And I've spoken to a number of medical practitioners. My wife was a nurse, so I got to know quite a few doctors, and some of my good friends are doctors, that they say, how can we cut the time down any shorter than it already is if we want to give quality health care?
Right. The medical side, they need to at least ask the correct questions, and this takes time, right? And it should be the prescriber, if you're going to give medicine, asking the questions. The nurses can do so much, but they cut down. And like in this, people understand on the psychology side, psychiatrists here in the States, I think they get about $175 to do a med eval. For Bob, come in. How you doing? Great. Okay. How's your meds doing? Great. Okay. Here, go ahead. They give you a prescription, and they're on to the next room. They make $175. They make $125 to do psychotherapy. So if you're running a business, what are you going to do?
Hey, Bob, come on in. Chat. How's your stuff? Yeah. Here's your script. Goodbye.
Yeah. And so there's that. Yeah. So you need to, to get the relationships. Because, again, if you don't have the relationship with your doctor, your primary care, or your you're not going to tell them what's really going on.
That's right.
And so that takes time.
Well, maybe we should stop spending more money and trying to figure out how to get to Mars and take that money and put it into the health and medical field, because there are more people on this planet who need help than going to a planet that has no people. That's just my opinion.
Oh, but Rob, come on. Bezos and Musk need another spaceship. We need to give them tax cuts. So
yeah. Dr. Will Horton, we have to say so long, sir. It's a pleasure talking to you. Please keep up the great work. And I first of all, I thank you for the work that you do, and this is coming from my heart. Thank you for your service.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Take care, sir.
Thank
and
you,
Exonation, if you'd like to find out more about Dr. Horton, his website is drwillhorton.com. When I come back from this commercial break, we're going to be talking about the paranormal with our next guest, so please don't go away. This is The X Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we return in about 10 minutes from now at the top of the hour. Don't go away.